What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the American Empire will fall, and I will show you that what will replace the American Empire is Israel, what we call Pax Judaica. So for these next 10 classes, we will do an overview of history and show you why history will lead ultimately to the Pax Judaica. Okay? All right, so let's do some questions from YouTube that my wife has picked out. She reads all the comments. She loves reading the comments. And she sends comments to me to reply to, okay? So the first comment is, how do we restore our right hemisphere? Or how do we become more creative? And the answer is that you have to reject materialism. That's the only way, okay? You have to reject money, you have to reject power, you have to reject materialism in order to embrace your creativity and your right hemisphere. As a society, what will have to happen is a major crisis that threatens our very existence for us to come together and for us to be more altruistic and more creative. A possibility is that if you really want to activate your right hemisphere, then you fall in love and you have children. Or you could also choose to volunteer, help other people, be kind and generous to other people, okay? So that's how you activate your right hemisphere. The second question is, do you only give lessons to one class? How's your journey to find some LSD? Okay, so I'm only teaching one lecture series, but to 3 different sections, okay? LSD, psychedelics, I'm very interested in psychedelics. I myself do not want to partake in psychedelics because I don't really understand why I need to. I read a lot of books. I practice a very altruistic lifestyle, and therefore I don't feel as though I need psychedelics to break out of this materialistic world, okay? I'm already connected to the divine. So, yeah. Okay, let's move on. All right, some more questions. Could you make a video on how to understand history without bias? And a response is, first of all, it's impossible to be unbiased, okay? And that is correct. We're all subjective. He suggests that you have to look at documents and try to be really critical when you analyze documents. And that's correct as well, okay? The problem is that often we don't have documentation, or we have documentation from only one source. So it's very hard to do. So what I'm trying to do with this class is try to propose a new theory of how to understand history. And if you adopt this model, I guarantee you that your understanding of history will improve, and also your understanding of how the world works will improve as well. So there are 3 components to this new history model, which I call predictive history, okay? The first is to understand historical patterns. And so when you try to look at history and the event there, you ask yourself, does this fit into a larger pattern or model of history? If it does, it's probably correct. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong here, okay? Second tool is the idea of game theory. And the idea of game theory is to understand that all historical actors are motivated by their interests or worldview. And so are you looking at all different historical actors, and are you trying to figure out what their best strategy is, okay? And the third facet is the idea of religious eschatological. What this means is that all cultures, all individuals have a certain religious outlook, a religious worldview. You can often find this worldview within their sacred text, for example, the Bible or the Quran, okay? And these texts will give you insight as to how they perceive history, but also how they want history to eventually develop. So you can understand the strategies moving forward, okay? All right, and we will look at these 3 strategies, and we will adapt them for our historical understanding, okay? All right, another question is, this is really interesting. The question is, most of the greats across history were not Jewish. The domination by Jews of various industries is a relatively new phenomenon. Is it possible that their creativity and power is a result of political shifts and education in the Bible? Okay, this is a really good criticism of my previous lecture. And yeah, I mean, the idea is that maybe there's certain aspects of the Jewish culture that makes them dominant in an industrial, capitalistic, globalized world. And there is some truth to that, but I often think about Chinese people. Because Chinese people are extremely materialistic. Like, Chinese love money. But we're not as creative as Jewish people. So I think that being materialistic, being capitalistic, it's not enough. You also need to have an element of creativity within your culture. And that's why I think that the Bible helps us better understand the success of Jews. better, okay? So this is a really good point. And also what's really important to understand is that this is a class on intellectual speculation, okay? We're trying to figure out theories. We're trying to play with ideas. There's no truth there, okay? So take everything I say with a grain of salt, doubt whatever I say. This class is really meant to be a platform or jumping board for you to undertake your own intellectual journey, okay? All right, so please keep that in mind. But we're going to look more closely at this question today. Okay, why is it that Jews are so dominant? So we will look at the beginning of the Jewish people. And I'm going to make the argument to you that Israel and the Jewish identity are constructs of the imperial imagination. Okay, and this is hard to understand, so I'm going to explain it to you slowly. But the idea is that because of its geographic location, Israel has always been historically important. And as a result, different empires have tried to manipulate the identity of Israel to best promote their own agenda or policies. Okay, so I know this is a hard concept to understand, but we'll go through it slowly. And again, we're spending like the rest of the semester on this major thesis of ours. Okay, so let's talk about history. Okay, so what we did last week is look at the cultures that have emerged out of Bronze Age collapse, which are now going to dominate history. Okay, they are the Greeks, the Persians, and the Israelites. Okay, now we're going to look at how these ideas play out in history. But for us to do that, we first need to understand how history works. Now, I've identified 3 different patterns of geopolitics. Okay, and I want you guys to remember these patterns. The first pattern is this. This is really important I didn't understand. Competition within nation states are what matter, okay? Competition between nation states don't really matter, or they're not as significant as competition within nation states. And the idea we have here is elite overproduction. So what drives a lot of conflict is the fact that domestically you have these different competing factions, and they're all competing for power, okay? So you have too many elites, too few status positions, and so they're competing against each other. And this drives a lot of conflict, okay? So that's the first idea. Second idea is that the elite have shifting loyalties, okay? Think of Game of Thrones. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the TV series or read the books Game of Thrones, but everyone wants to be king, right? And they're going to kill their brother. They're going to kill their father. They're going to kill their mother to be king, okay? And so the elite don't really have loyalties except to themselves. The world is just a Game of Thrones, okay? Now, third thing is that war can be a mechanism to protect the status quo. All right, the idea of equilibrium, in that sometimes the conflict is really bad, so what you do is start a war so you can start off people to get killed, okay? And that way you can maintain equilibrium within your system. And we'll see this we'll see this pattern throughout human history, okay? So these are the 3 ideas I want you guys to remember as we move on and discuss world history. All right, so I want to give us an example for us to understand. Okay, think of the Warring States period of China before the emergence of the first empire, the Qing Empire, okay? And as you can see from this map, China is divided into different warring states that are all powerful. And at this time in history, the Qing state is the poorest, it's most isolated, and it is the least advanced. Okay, you can see that Chu, Zhao, they are more powerful. And you can argue that eventually one of them would emerge to unite all of China, but they did not. It was the Qing, the isolated, marginalized, backward state that came to conquer. And so the question is, why did this happen? And so if we use our 3 principles, right, we can understand why. These different states are not competing against each other. It's the elites within these states are competing against each other, okay, elite overproduction. So the way they manage this is for them to use warfare in order to maintain the status quo, to create equilibrium, okay? And how we know is, from this time emerges the idea of Chinese chess, right? What is Chinese chess? Chinese chess is the idea of warfare that is regulated, that is ritualized. Okay, so when we go to war, when we battle each other, we have to respect each other's the rules of the warfare. That's stupid. War should be about killing the other guy. It shouldn't be about following the rules, okay? Also, another piece of evidence is, at this time in history, Sun Tzu wrote the book, The Art of War. This is one of the stupidest books ever written, okay? I guarantee you, if you follow this book, you're going to lose the war badly. Because this is really about how to cheat in a heavily regulated game, okay? So things like using spies, making a high ground, okay? They have all these rules. And guess what? In an actual war, none of these things actually work, okay? So if you look at history, I'm going to tell you exactly how to win a war, okay? And the way you win a war is First of all, you have to be completely committed to winning this war. Okay, total warfare. Second is that if you want to win this war, you have to make sure that talent arises. So you have to be open and meritocratic. Okay, if an officer, if a general is winning this war, you promote him. That sounds easy, right? But not if you're status quo power. Because what's important to you is to maintain that your family is always on top. So if a general arises who is very innovative, who's really talented, you kill him because he's a threat to you. Okay? So the third principle is make sure your soldiers are happy. I know it sounds really simple, but again, if you're a status quo power, you don't really care. Okay? Destroy enemy civilian centers. Siege warfare. Okay? Go and destroy the city because that's how they produce their war capacity, right? The food, the soldiers, right? Kill civilians. Destroy supply lines. Overstretch your enemy. Divide and conquer. Strike fear in your enemy. Kill their gods. Okay? If you really want a war, if you really want to win a war, this is what you have to do.